Thank you, team. Thank you for that good rendition of the John Mayer song. It's a great song. What a question that it poses for us today. How in the world can we create a change? And thank you, Elise, for your story and for introducing that. And just thank you, Elise, for you. So glad you're a part of us and we're a part of you. I used to think, and maybe you did too, more so when I was young, I don't think about it that much anymore, well, when the old generation dies, then things are going to change. Well, I'm the old generation now, and we haven't changed. We have changed. There are such improvements in our culture today from maybe where they were when I was in high school and college. But on the other hand, I feel like there aren't that many great improvements. I feel at some time, there's an old book by evangelical Chuck Swindoll entitled 3 Steps Forward and 2 Steps Back. Sometimes I feel like it's 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. Waiting for the world to change, where we're just waiting for some people to die. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're talking about today in this series that was introduced by our video right there. Who died and left you in charge? We're waiting for this generation to die, the generation that's in charge, so a new generation can take their place. But I'm not really convinced that the new generation is going to share the values that I think they ought to have. And so I don't know what to do about that. We've all heard the phrase, maybe we've even used the phrase, well, who died and left you in charge? Maybe you said that to a bossy sibling. I'm thinking of not anybody in particular. I'm looking at Gary next to you there, yeah. Or maybe you said that in relation to an overreaching coworker, or maybe you said it under your breath to that neighbor who has appointed themselves as the enforcer of the HOA rules. It's our natural reaction, who died and left you in charge, when someone seems to overstep their authority. And I tried real hard this week to think of an example of that, but I just can't. So we'll just move on. And in a world where leadership often disappoints, and I'm in leadership, and I have disappointed a lot of people in my 46 years of pastoring, it is a question worth asking, who died and left you in charge? But here's the idea that we're going to be exploring in the next few weeks. Maybe the question is not about really who is in charge. Maybe the question is, what can we do regardless of who is in charge? Think about it. These characters from the Hebrew history and those great fun stories that maybe you heard in Sunday school as a child. Moses was faced with Pharaoh. David was faced with Goliath. Neither Moses or David were in charge. Yet, what they did made a big difference. So in this series, we're going to discover that making a difference does not require a position, a title. Doesn't even require that we have anybody's permission. So whether you're dealing with difficult bosses, a challenging, tense family dynamic, challenging political landscapes, or community issues, you have more power than you think. So yes, we'll start by acknowledging the frustration in that question, who died and left you in charge? But hopefully by the end of the series, we'll realize that maybe the better question is, well, who is stopping me from making a difference right now? Right where I am. Because it's my understanding that real impact does not come from a position, a title, or permission. Real impact comes from an attitude, and it comes from action. So today, I want us to discover that making a difference requires a heart of service and a willingness to follow. When I was growing up, junior high on, I would get asked the question, maybe you were too, do you want to be a leader or a follower? Are you a leader or a follower? We got that from our church, got that from maybe teachers in school. We got that from coaches if we were in sports, and from well-meaning adults in our life. But I don't really think the adults that asked me that, maybe it was different for you, really wanted an answer to that question. Are you a leader or a follower? I think they were communicating very subtly a message, and that message was, you don't want to be a follower. You want to be a leader. Following gets a bad rap. Our culture extols leaders and strong type A type of people. So have you really ever heard any honestly admit, I am not a follower, or I am just a follower. I don't really want to be a leader. No, our culture doesn't really allow that type of honesty. But this girl did. Back when I was in high school, my parents had a book in their library called None of These Diseases by S.I. McMillan. I remember reading that, and I read this story that really hit home with me. It tells of a high school girl who was applying for colleges. And when she got to this question, her heart sank. The question was, are you a leader? And she answered honestly, no. And she knew that with that answer, her chances of going to that college were shot because everybody wants leaders. So she got a letter from the college. She opened it up with a lot of anxiety, but she was so surprised when she read their answer. Dear applicant, a study of the application form reveals that this year our college will have 1,452 new leaders. We are accepting you because we feel it is important that they have at least one follower. Yeah, we live in a world that glorifies leaders, especially strong, get-her-done leaders. Michael Jordan Jackson, where'd that come from? Teamwork is a lot of people doing what I say. I think he said that tongue-in-cheek. But there's something to be said for that. Lou Holtz was Arkansas's football coach back when I think I was in college, maybe seminary, back in the mid to late 70s, and I loved him. He said, on this team, we're all united in a common goal to keep my job. And I just love that idea. And those perspectives do make us chuckle, but they are far from the heart of the Jesus that I am learning about. And I think that the far apart from the Jesus that I see, maybe you see it differently, revealed in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and especially John. In the Gospel of John, for whatever reason, I don't know, but the author of the Gospel of John has Jesus consistently describing himself. And the reason I said that is that Jesus didn't speak Greek. Jesus spoke Aramaic. The New Testament was written in Greek. And so it was translated by whoever wrote the Gospel of John. Most people think John did. And so it's really very difficult sometimes to capture everything in a translation. And now we have it in English, and it's gone through so many translations. But there is a gist, and there is an essence of how the Gospel of John records and remembers what Jesus said. And he consistently talks about himself in terms of being a follower. The Son can do nothing of his own accord, but only what he sees the Father doing. I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. My teaching is not mine, but his who sent me. I do nothing on my own, but speak just what the Father taught me. But the world must know that I love the Father, so I do exactly what the Father told me to do. I have loved you as the Father has loved me. Now continue in my love. He modeled for the disciples love because Jesus saw that type of self-sacrificing, serving, humble love in the Father, which really is a very different view of God that we see in the early part of Hebrew history. We saw it more with the prophets, but not hardly any in the first few books of the Hebrew Scripture, which tells me that the Bible is a record, in my understanding, of how people grew and evolved in their understanding of the divine until we see it fulfilled very well in the person of Jesus. When I read these a few weeks ago in thinking about this teaching, I was a little bit surprised by it because I always think of Jesus as a leader. I mean, he started a whole Christianity thing, didn't he? Not really, but his disciples did. But we think of him as a leader. But in every point of this picture that John gives us, Jesus is playing the role of a follower and not a leader. And it's worth noting, it seems to me anyway, that Jesus did not do this following thing as a precursor to something else. It wasn't just preliminary training for another role that he was to take. It seems like he presented his persona to the disciples. The primary persona he presented was a follower, not a leader. And then his encouragement to them was to pattern their lives after him, be a follower. And Paul does the same thing. He writes, I believe it was 2, because I don't have it in my notes, the Ephesians, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And that's exactly what Jesus was telling the disciples to do. And so I want us to consider this. God calls us first and foremost to be Christ's followers and not leaders. So what does it mean to be a follower? Well, today when we think of followers, we think of followers on social media. Overall, the most followed people on social media are Cristiano Ronaldo, the soccer player, 1 billion, Selena, 690 million, on down, Taylor Swift, poor Taylor, only has 574 million. The host of this year's Academy Awards, Conan O'Brien, said, I don't get why people follow celebrities on Twitter. It's like a digital version of waiting outside their hotel window yelling, what are you doing now? He's not wrong. But following doesn't mean just going with the flow. It doesn't mean we just do what everybody asks us to do or what everybody else is doing. How many times have you heard our parents or the adult in our lives saying, if everybody jumped off the cliff, would you do it? Trying to get us not to be followers. And there's some wisdom in that, obviously. But I think as Jesus expresses following, what I get from that is that to Jesus, following means intentionally watching and learning and imitating what somebody else is doing. When the writers of Jesus' story talk about followers, they use this Greek word, akolutheo, and maybe you grew up in a Lutheran church, a Catholic church, maybe even a Methodist church that had kind of a understudy people called acolytes, and it came from this word, akolutheo. And in those churches, those individuals would carry or light the candles. They would maybe carry crosses in a liturgical setting or swing a censer as they come down the aisle. And I don't think that's really what Jesus was talking about when he called his disciples. In the Greek, writers use this word to describe what Jesus was saying. It means the word to assist or to accompany. And I think maybe what Jesus was saying when he called people to follow him, and when the gospel writers talk about the followers of Jesus, it was almost like Jesus was just saying, I want you to come hang with me. I want you to accompany me. Yeah, I want you to work with me. I want you to follow me. I want you to just see how I live and to see my values and see how I treat people. And I want you to imitate that. We read these words of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus asks the question to this crowd that's gathered around him. Are y'all tired? Are you worn out? You burned out on religion? It's interesting that Jesus was asking that in the first century. Well, come to me and get away with me, and you will recover your life. You will recover your identity. You will recover who you really are. So many times religion hides our true self. And I will show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, hang with me, and work with me. And watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Those are beautiful words. Learn is a translation of a Greek word that was used to describe the actual 12 disciples of Jesus, the followers. And a disciple of Jesus, and that's not just those 12, but any of us, is a learner of Jesus. We learn the way of Jesus. We learn to treat people like Jesus treats people. We learn the values of the Sermon on the Mount and the Beatitudes. We learn those. In 1982, 2 years after Denise and I got married, a song came out called All This Love by DeBarge. It was one of our favorite songs because it so described this stage of life that Denise and I were in our marriage in 1982. These were the lyrics. I wish I could sing it. Michelle, come sing this if you knew it. It sounded so convincing that I gave it half a chance and learned the ways of love, my baby. Denise and I, when we got married in 1980, didn't know each other real well as a romantic couple, as a boyfriend and girlfriend. We knew each other pretty well as friends, but not even a depth of a friendship. And so we, as a 24-year-old and a 19-year-old, moving into this married life, we learned the ways of love. We learned how to respond. We learned how to give. We learned how to listen. We learned how to serve each other. We learned how to wait on each other and to be patient with each other and to defer to one another. We learned the ways of love. Boy, we just didn't say I do in Little Rock First Baptist Church and immediately know all those things. We had to learn the way. And when we say yes to Jesus, and that's kind of what baptism is a public demonstration of, we say yes to Jesus and we're saying, all right, I want to learn your ways, Jesus. I want to learn the ways of love, the ways of the Beatitudes, the way of mercy and compassion. That's why Jesus told the religious leaders when they got on to him for healing a guy on the Sabbath, he said, I want you all, you religious experts, to go back and learn the meaning of, and he quoted Amos, do justice, love mercy, be kind, and walk humbly with God. We have to learn those things. Jesus taught that through an example. The disciples had gathered in an upstairs room to celebrate the Passover, but when they got there, they took their places. Something was wrong. There was no one there to wash the yuck off of their feet. And none of the disciples were going to volunteer. So Jesus stood up. He took off his robe, put on a towel, grabbed the basin of water from the little table, and he went to a disciple and he knelt down in front of him. And Jesus took his foot firmly in his grasp and unbuckled his sandals, took it off, and he washed the disciples' feet, and you could hear a pin drop. Jesus washing feet? He's supposed to be the leader. That's follower stuff. One of my understanding of this is that whether you're a leader because of your position, whether you are a follower because of your position, the one thing that Jesus is teaching us, because he was both leader and follower, is the quality that will cause us to have a big bigger impact upon our culture than anything else is the quality of humility. To be willing to serve, to listen, and to understand. Jennifer Garcia Bashaw is an associate professor of New Testament at Campbell University in North Carolina. And she writes about this text about Jesus washing feet, that preachers love to clarify that the task of washing feet fell to the lowly servants, but it is more accurate to say that it was usually performed by lowly female servants. And as much as it pains me as a woman commentator to say it, Nisi, can I have my tea, please? Thank you. I forgot it, didn't I? As much as it pains me as a woman commentator to say it, the fact that Jesus takes on the task of a female servant is extra humiliating in the eyes of the disciples. Woman's work, boy, we still use that. Hopefully that is a generational change from when I was a kid and saw my dad expecting my mom maybe to do woman's work. Well, the shock and the resistance we see in Peter's response was, "You will never wash my feet." When Peter suggests that Jesus wash his hands and head as well, he was trying to force Jesus out of the female servant position into the role of a male religious leader. Don't wash my feet, but baptize me. That's what the priest would do. They would baptize the whole person. It was the woman's job to wash the feet. But Jesus pushes back against his discomfort because his humiliating role reversal is central to the lesson he is teaching the disciples. The lesson is it's all about humility. Jesus took upon himself a humiliating, in the eyes of culture, role. And then Paul captures this essence of Jesus in his letter to the Philippians. You must, this is no option. You must have the same attitude that Christ Jesus had. Previous to that verse, he says, because there's some conflict in the church, and he said, I want you all, because you're the one spirit, of the one family, I want you to think of other people's opinions as more highly than your own. Boy, the Democrats, can we think more highly of the Republicans' opinion than of our own? Republicans, can we think more highly of the Democrats' opinion than of our own? Maybe not. But can we listen to the opinions and consider the opinions to understand the origin of those opinions? I think so. Paul goes on, though he was God, he did not think equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, he gave up his divine privileges and he took the humble position of a slave. I think humility just may be the most essential quality for our leaders and for followers alike. Bertrand Russell was a Nobel Prize, won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1950. And in an interview in 1959 with a magazine, he says something that has nothing to do with my sermon. But I like it. I know I didn't have time to put it up on the screen, so listen to it, if you will. He said, gosh, this is 1959, he said, facts matter. Facts matter. Love is wise. Hatred is foolish. Boom. That is so, so good. I'm comforted by that fact that he said it in 1959. Because evidently there were some groups of people that didn't think facts mattered. Well, he said this in relationship to the sermon. The whole problem with the world is that Fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people so full of doubt. This was said before the internet, before social media. And due to the joys of social media, we are regularly exposed to people who believe that they know what the hell they're talking about. Amen. We all really kind of do this. I do it. Every time I get up here, I think I know what I'm talking about. That's why I tell you, I probably don't. So check everything out that I say. But look at elderly drivers as an example. How do you know when it's time to hang up the car keys when your dog has this look on his face? I'm getting to that point, probably. Well, elderly people who think that they're better drivers than everybody else are actually 4 times more likely to make stupid driving errors that put themselves and other people in danger. The lowest performers in a debate competition wildly overestimate how well they did. They thought they'd won 59% of their contest, but they actually won only 22% of them. We always think we're better than we are. Well, yeah, Philip, you don't get it. I really am better. Well, we all have blind spots, don't we? What I am discovering is that humility removes the blind spots and allows me to see myself and be okay with my weaknesses, my failures, my lack of understanding. It was a relief to me years and years ago at the other church when I just kind of was able to, it doesn't matter what people think anymore. I don't have to live up to anybody's standards, really. And I began to tell the church in Sunday services, I really don't know what this means, and my interpretation may be wrong. And it was just refreshing to invite other people's opinion. So humility removes the blinders. It allows me to see me. It allows me to see others. And ultimately, it's not about whether you're a leader or a follower. It's about your humility. It's about whether we're willing to humble ourselves and learn from others. And learn that maybe my way is not the best way, and to learn the way of love. And to be willing to admit when we're wrong and that there's something better out there. Today, as Elise said, we're just one day away from the Trans Day of Visibility. It's a day that calls us to recognize and celebrate individuals who are transgender and non-binary who are in our community. And just remember that Jesus modeled radical love and acceptance, and he went against the culture when he did that. And we are very much going against the culture at the venues. And I'm so very happy that we are of that type of people. And this day that we'll celebrate tomorrow reminds us that truly following the ways of love means creating a space for everyone to be seen and heard and valued, just as the way they are. Let me close with these words of Gandhi. The world changes when we change ourselves, and humility is the first step toward true change. One of our values, we have 4 key values at the venues. One of those is intellectual humility. The willingness to admit that we don't have all the answers. We can learn from others, even those who disagree with us. And that curiosity is greater than certainty. So, let's go from here. Let's not worry if we're leaders or followers, if we have a title or not. But let's embrace the power of humility. Not as a weakness, but as a strength that will enable us to love freely, to follow very closely, to see people in the situation more clearly. And if we are in a position of leadership, to lead wisely. Let's do that.